5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live as it's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Welcome to our very savvy and smart audience. You know, events are just coming down at an unbelievable pace. We just heard today there was another shooting involving the Border Patrol in Arizona. We have no details other than some very sketchy information provided by law enforcement down there itself. But it does seem that death stalks this administration, whether it's in this country, whether it's in boats blown up without due process on high seas, whether it's dozens of people killed in a raid in Venezuela, people killed elsewhere. Death stalks this administration, whether it's people at risk of death in poor countries because of the curtailment of USAID. That's what we're seeing, and it's unfortunate.
Unfortunately, we've got an echo, so I need to... I don't know why that always happens, so I need to unplug the mic and plug it back in again. 1 second. Okay, we're back. Hopefully that fixed it.
So there is a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack, although we're going to zero in on the horrific events in Minneapolis, particularly the recent killing of ICU nurse Alex Pretti and the administration's response to it.
All right. Yes, we will. And let's start with the first topic of our titular topic, right? That's how you'd say it?
Yes.
That sounds a little dirty, don't you think? Titular?
Please.
Okay. Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino is out of Minneapolis amid mounting controversy and political pressure following the killings of Renee and Alex Pretti. Border Czar Tom Homan will begin leading on-the-ground efforts in the city. Dad, do you think this is a sign the Trump administration will back off in Minneapolis?
Absolutely not.
Really?
This is cosmetic. Tom Homan is no angel. He does have a long history with Border Patrol and ICE, and for a time he was considered a moderate. No longer. He has gone full bore into buying the entire Trump narrative about alleged undocumented immigrants, and according to press reports, has been a strong advocate for the separation of families. According to press reports as well, he was caught on video taking a $50,000 payment from an FBI agent, which according to press reports was in return for a promise to help those who are giving him the money to get government contracts if Donald Trump were to win in 2024. That investigation was closed. We don't actually know what the result of the investigation was because the Trump administration closed it down immediately, produced no information about it. There are lawsuits now to try to reveal the information. But here was a guy on tape allegedly accepting a bribe. I use the word allegedly, but certainly, that would have been worthy of investigation by the same Justice Department that is trying to prosecute James Comey for answering a confusing question by Senator Ted Cruz about something he said 2 years earlier, or trying to prosecute Letitia James about some very ambiguous statement on a mortgage application, the kind of thing that, according to press reports, Donald Trump himself has done on his mortgage statement.
Wait, are you trying to tell me that the Trump administration uses the law against their enemies but doesn't use it in the same way against their allies? No,
Can you imagine that?
I can't imagine that for a second.
You know what? they're open about it. It's not,
Right,
again,
that's
they're not- this Donald Trump has said, the retribution is coming. And that plays out constantly in the Trump administration. So I do not see this replacement of Bovino, who was the nasty face of ICE enforcement and Border Patrol enforcement in Minneapolis. And by the way, we just saw it tonight, did we not, on CNN, I think it was, a very chilling video about, it didn't involve killing anyone, but it really gave you a window into how ICE is operating in Minneapolis. Do you remember that video, Sam?
Yeah, it's pretty old now. It's been around the internet for a while, but CNN aired it tonight. It was with a Somalian.
I hadn't seen it before.
It was with a Somalian man who was a U.S. citizen who was being harassed by ICE, asking for his papers, his ID, and racially profiling him and saying that his accent was reason for them approaching him.
They had no basis for approaching him other than the fact that he was black
and had an accent.
Complete racial profiling.
Anybody who tries to tell you that they're doing anything other than racial profiling is lying to you. They're completely,
there it was.
Yeah,
again, they tell you, don't believe your own eyes. Don't believe what you hear. And we saw it right there on video, harassing this guy, demanding, produce your papers. How many of us go around with proof of citizenship? And you know what? We don't have to under American law. We are not required, when stopped on the street or in our cars, to produce proof of citizenship to prevent us from being detained by ICE. Apparently, they took a picture of his driver's license and ran it through some database.
His license plate.
And it didn't prove that he wasn't a U.S. citizen. But I got to warn you, these databases they use, I've studied them because I've been an expert witness in cases involving immigration enforcement. They are wildly inaccurate, and U.S. citizens are often ensnared through the use of these databases. They're not up to date. People are naturalized every day, and there are all kinds of ways in which you can obtain U.S. citizenship which are not fully represented in these databases. In America, no one should be stopped when they're just going about their business. This guy was an Uber driver or a Lyft driver. No one in America, because of how they look or how they speak or any other reason, should be stopped on the street or conducting your business and have to produce your papers proving you are a U.S. citizen. That is not American.
There have been lots of videos online of people showing ICE racially profiling them, approaching them because of their skin color, or once they approach them, they ask them about their accent and ask them where they were born. There's been lots and lots of videos showing that.
Yeah, this was particularly interesting because they openly admitted that they racial profiled him, right? They talked about his accent, did they not? Quite openly.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a lot of videos like that out there now.
I'm sure, but this one was particularly telling, I thought, also because the big boss showed up, right?
Right.
Bovino.
The old big boss.
The old big boss, I guess, is no longer the big boss. He himself showed up.
Let's move on from this video. The video is like 3 weeks old, and I don't know why CNN was just covering it tonight. I guess because they had an interview with that guy.
Here's what I want to move on to.
Yes, go for it, sir.
What Noam said about what this incident involving Pretti was long before any investigation, just shortly after this had occurred. She said he brandished a pistol and wanted to, quote, inflict maximum damage on individuals and kill law enforcement, unquote. She said, quote, he approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently, Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, the agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead.
Shit. They stood there and unloaded their clip on him.
Exactly.
They provided medical advice to a guy.
And a doctor showed up and they wouldn't let him. Just like with the case of Good.
Oh, it was the same thing as Good?
Yes.
Oh. But the idea that they showed up and provided medical advice. If anybody saw that video, you see multiple officers unloading their clip on his dead body. I mean, there was no medical...
Denying a doctor and clapping. And one of them was saying boo-hoo, as if his life didn't mean a damn thing, because he was one of those, deranged liberals who, Donald Trump and his administration has dehumanized, called scum, vermin, beneath contempt. She also said it looked like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and kill law enforcement. Huh? She also blamed Minnesota governor and mayor for this violence. She called it a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons and are using them to assault law enforcement officers, wishing to inflict harm. I'm quoting here. Hard to believe, but I am. Wishing to inflict harm on these officers, coming, brandishing like that, and impeding their work, committing an act of domestic terrorism.
Right, she's lying. I mean, every video that we've seen of this incident proves everything she said wrong. And you can see in the video one of the officers taking the gun out of the back.
That's the only time we ever saw the gun. Did he ever brandish it, Sam?
No,
never.
Once.
We have the video from the first contact from the officers to their shooting him dead. The gun was never in his hand. She lied. It was never brandished. He never approached officers with a gun. They never attempted at that point to disarm him, because what did he have in his hand, Sam?
A phone.
A phone. And what did he have in his other hand?
Nothing.
And who initiated the violent contact?
The Border Patrol agents.
Yes. They first pepper sprayed him when he only had a phone and nothing else in his hands. They pepper sprayed him. They forced him down on the ground. Never once did he have a gun in his hand. Clearly, one of the agents pulled the gun, and then they shot him and kept shooting him while he was helpless on the ground, and then applauded. Can you believe that? They applauded and said boo-hoo. Everything she said was a lie. Not one thing that she said bore any relationship to the truth. But here's the thing.
Tell me.
There have been 16 shootings. New York Times went through them.
Okay.
Every single time they say the same thing. Doesn't matter who was involved. Doesn't matter the circumstances. Every time before there's an investigation completed, they say essentially the same thing. The person attacked the officer feared for their life, they've shot defensively, they were harmless, the blame is to the victim. The truth is, Sam, and this is not hyperbole, ICE or Border Patrol could execute a group of nuns praying in a church, and the Trump administration would say they were domestic terrorists and ICE was acting in self-defense, because that's what they always say, no matter the circumstances. And when the facts come out, these excuses, as they have both in the case of Ms. Good and in the case of Mr. Pretti, the claims fall apart. But they had fallen apart in lots of other instances as well. Here is the case of Marimar Martinez, a U.S. citizen who was charged with assault after being shot 5 times by Border Patrol agent Charles Exum during a traffic stop in Chicago on October 4th. They accused her of aggressively and erratically pursuing Exum and ramming his car. But guess what the agent's own body camera footage showed, Sam?
Tell me.
The opposite. that Exum had rammed Martinez's vehicle and then pointed his gun at her, threatened her, shot her 5 times, and then bragged about it.
Yikes.
And when they had to prove it in court, guess what a federal judge did?
Tell me.
Dismissed all the charges against Miss Martinez, and then, of course, suppressed all of the evidence so it wouldn't be made public. Right here in our own home state of Maryland, Sam, DHS officials had to change their account of a shooting in Glen Burnie, Maryland on Christmas Eve. Several ICE officers fired at the driver of a van, who authorities said rammed their vehicles and drove at them. Okay? This was investigated by the Anne Arundel police. So the actual local police, not DHS, got to investigate, and they found that the account was entirely false. The passenger was already in ICE custody when the shooting occurred. DHS then had to backtrack from their account. Unbelievable. And that's, we can look at example after example.
Now, the interesting thing, too, is that it seems unclear how or if the incident involving Alex Pretti will be investigated.
That is another big thing.
Yeah.
Supposedly Donald Trump, has backed off. He's being conciliatory. If he is, and I have real questions, it's not because he suddenly sees the truth. He's suddenly remorseful, right? It's because of the political backlash. He only backs off after the political backlash. And if you look carefully, he's not really backing off. Did he repudiate what Noam said? No. He said she's doing a great job, and I'm not going to fire her. He continued to harp on the fact that this guy had a gun, when the fact that he had a gun had nothing to do with his killing by the ICE officers. The gun was never in his hand or close to being in his hand. And he continued to attack and blame local officials like Governor Walz and Mayor Frey. And then he said, we're going to de-escalate a little bit. What does that mean, Sam?
Nothing.
And then he said, we're going to have a great investigation, and I'm going to make sure. Yeah. Exactly. Let's have the fox guard the hen house, right? The administration is going to investigate itself, and the president, who is in charge of all this, the buck stops there, although Trump never thinks the buck stops anywhere near him. He's the guy in charge, and he's going to make sure that there's a full and fair investigation.
Now, interestingly, again, to the Alex Pretti case, his shooting has sort of reshaped the debate over gun rights, because the Trump administration is sort of going against a lot of their Second Amendment sort of rhetoric, and a lot of gun rights advocates are sort of questioning this administration. Even several prominent Republican allies of Trump are now publicly distancing themselves from Trump's immigration tactics.
Yeah, as we said, hypocrisy is too strong a word here. Trump pardoned, without an investigation, numerous individuals who forced their way into the Capitol, part of the insurrection, part of the violence, with guns, right? And that, no problem with that. And yet this guy having a concealed handgun out on the street in a public place, not in the U.S. Capitol, oh my God, that is unacceptable. That's not allowed. Kash Patel, who celebrated Kyle Rittenhouse, who openly carried an assault weapon into a swirling, uncertain protest, killed 2 people, wounded another. That was a great exercise of Second Amendment rights. Now he somehow has found a protest exception to the Second Amendment, right? Saying you can't bring a concealed weapon, even a legal one, into a protest. First of all, it wasn't a protest. It wasn't a riot.
No.
This guy was documenting and filming, as was his right, what ICE was doing.
And interestingly, too, during the COVID years, there was this big, I don't even know what you want to call it, protest riot at the Michigan State House, and there were right-wing folks inside the State House with assault rifles. And the right wing didn't seem to have any problem with that.
None whatsoever. As I said, hypocrisy. In other words, time and again, what Trump and his allies have made clear, not subtly, but right out in the open, only those who agree and support us have rights. Only those who agree with us and support us have Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. I'm not defending the Second Amendment. I'm just saying, I'm comparing how they've regarded the Second Amendment in other contexts as compared to this. Plus, only those who agree with us and support us have First Amendment rights. I wrote a whole column about this. It's been very much unnoticed, but he put out a presidential memo, which is very strong, criminalizing speech that he doesn't agree with, criminalizing things like anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, anti-religion speech has become criminal. Look what he's doing to institutions all over the country, squashing free speech, forcing cultural institutions, educators to conform to his own political orthodoxy. This is the very essence of authoritarianism, the selective application of rights to support the regime and only the regime.
Apparently, this is fairly breaking news, happened about an hour ago. Ilhan Omar was sprayed by an unknown substance after a man charged at her at a Minneapolis town hall. Seems like she's okay, but...
And they've attacked her mercilessly, right?
Yeah.
Even though she's a U.S. citizen, right? Saying she should go back to where she came from. She doesn't belong here. She's un-American. And, understand, one of the roots of all this is the dehumanization by Donald Trump and his allies of those who disagree with him. They're scum. They're vermin. They're deranged, crazed individuals. They're dehumanized, so their life isn't worth anything. So no wonder when the ICE agent kills Renee Good, he says, fucking bitch. That's how they regard. Or the clapping after the execution of Mr. Pretti, or the boo-hoo. This permeates the notion that people like Renee Good or Alex Pretti are not worth anything. They're not real human beings whose lives in any way should be valued. Or this agent bragging after pumping 5 shots into Miss Martinez.
I want to remind everybody to like the stream if you're watching. We have over 1,000 people watching, but only 300 likes.
We have over 1,000 people watching.
What did I say?
500.
Oh, I meant to say 1,000, but only 300 likes. Liking the stream helps a lot. I heard this point being made. I don't exactly know how true it is, but I heard some historian or professor noting that part of the reason why the American right and the Trump administration is going so hard after Minnesota and Minneapolis is because it's one of the few examples in the U.S. where social programs actually work and where levels of happiness are actually pretty high.
And where crime is low. There have been 3 murders, I think, this year, 2 of them by ICE or Border Patrol.
Do you think there's any validity to that the reason why, and I can't quite follow this whole fraud thing that the Trump administration
That's just an excuse.
But why did Walz then step down? I would have, I understand that being mostly bullshit, but Walz stepping down seems a little strange. I don't get.
What do you mean Walz stepping down?
He's not running again.
Yeah. Well, that was even before all.
No, it wasn't. It was part of the
killings.
Before the killings, but it was part of this whole Minnesota targeting fraud, Somalians.
I can't speculate on why he wasn't running. He was under a lot of fire. He didn't do very well as the vice presidential nominee. There was fraud uncovered on his watch. And by the way, of course, only fraud exists for Democrats and people of color. Trump supporters, white people, He has pardoned dozens of horrific fraudsters, including one of them twice. Not only pardoned them, but through the pardons, denied their victims getting restitution. If you think for a moment that Donald Trump cares one whit about fraud, I have a very big bridge to sell you in my hometown of Brooklyn.
But what do you think about the point I made that...
I don't know. As I said, he was kind of discredited after...
No. Let me finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
Okay. What do you think about my point that part of the reason why they're targeting Minnesota and Minneapolis is because they know it's a state and a city where social programs are working, and it goes directly against their push and their agenda and their political ideology?
That's very brilliant. I can't prove it, but it certainly is a plausible hypothesis.
Gotcha. Anything else you want to make about the ICE stuff in Minneapolis?
The chief judge in Minneapolis, federal judge, chief of the district court, a Republican appointee, I think George W. Bush, who clerked for the leading conservative justice, he's late now, but the leading conservative justice of the 20th century. You know who that was?
Thurgood Marshall?
No, Antonin Scalia.
Oh,
yeah.
I wasn't really listening.
So this is no deranged activist liberal judge. He said ICE has failed to obey his instructions. He expressed, according to the press report, exasperation about an extraordinary request from the Justice Department to have him reverse another judge's decision and personally issue, get this, arrest warrants for the journalist Don Lemon and 4 other people. He called the request frivolous and unprecedented. He also noted that time and again, when it came to individual cases, that the Justice Department has simply ignored, and DHS has simply ignored court orders. And he's ordered the head of ICE to appear Friday, and if he doesn't, he's going to be held in contempt. Once again, not caring about the separation of powers, not caring about court orders, totally exasperating and, going beyond the beyond for a conservative Republican appointed judge. And by the way, I think this just happened. Another judge has said that ICE or Border Patrol is ever doing, I think it's ICE, cannot, while the hearing is going on, deport this, remember this 5-year-old kid?
Yeah.
And that was a big cause celeb. They can't do it. They can't deport this kid and his dad, who are going through legal proceedings. They can't just send them away while the proceedings are taking place. We'll see if they obey that court order.
We'll see. They don't seem to really care about court orders that much.
No, that's why this conservative judge has ordered the head
of ICE
to appear before him and explain why they're not following the court orders.
Right. Our next topic of the night. Families of 2 men killed in separate U.S. military boat strikes under the Trump administration have filed a lawsuit against the federal government seeking accountability for the deaths.
I need a drink for that.
Oh, okay.
As I said, death seems to accompany everything that this administration touches, including over 100 deaths on the high seas through attacks on these helpless boats. They can't, stop American bombs or missiles. Killed over 117 people. And how much due process was there before this killing took place?
I don't think this administration believes in due process at all.
Exactly. Zero. This was just on Donald Trump's say-so that these people were carrying drugs. No proof. Not even any public proof, much less going through proper due process procedures. They very easily could have been intercepted, which was standard practice, by the Coast Guard or the Navy without having to kill anyone. And in one notorious instance, we know, even if their claim that, it's a war because the cartels have declared war on us and these boats are manned by cartel members. Even if that were true, which is highly dubious, they committed a clear war crime by blowing up in their very first attack 2 survivors out of 11 crew members of a boat who were just clinging to wreckage and posed no threat. There's a precedent for that, the Peleus case in World War II, when a submarine sank a merchant ship and did just what the U.S. did, killed survivors clinging to wreckage. 3 members of the crew were tried, and get this, Sam, for that same war crime, sentenced to death and executed. So now the families of these 2 allegedly Trinidadians who were killed are suing the U.S., saying these were not people running drugs at all. They were simply returning home and not involved in drug trafficking. It's very much of an unprecedented lawsuit, but I'm delighted to see it regardless of the outcome, because maybe this will force the administration to show some proof regarding their claim, A, that these are cartel members, B, that the cartels are at war with us. I presume, from everything I know about the Trump administration, they're going to claim national security and try to shut this down and release nothing to the public.
Philip H. just donated $5. We saw, Ilhan Omar was just attacked. We just mentioned it a few minutes ago.
Yes, we talked about that. It's what happens when you dehumanize people. They become targets.
Our final topic before we get to questions. A major new nationwide poll has identified the most and least admired members of the U.S. Senate, with the highest approval ratings, including Bernie Sanders, Peter Welch, Elizabeth Warren, and Brian Schatz. Senators with the highest disapproval ratings are Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Dan Sullivan, and Ron Johnson. Of the top 12 senators with the highest approval rating, 7 are Democrats, 2 are independents, and only 3 are Republicans. The 11 senators with the highest disapproval rating are all Republicans.
Do I need comment? I think that speaks for itself and tells you why Republicans in the House and Senate are terrified. They're doing a horrible job, and the American people realizes that they're doing the worst Congress ever, perhaps. You know, one major bill, which is scarcely an achievement. It's pernicious. It diverts income to people who don't need it at the expense of middle class and less affluent Americans, blows a big hole in the deficit. And at the same time, they did nothing to try to make health insurance more affordable. Premiums are skyrocketing. People have to make choices between health insurance and shelter and food. So no wonder, you know, the most disapproved senators are all Republicans. And most of the approved senators are Democrats and independents.
I want to add the end of Philip H's question was, what are the chances we see the spark? What are the chances we see the spark that will ignite a war before the mid? We talk about. I feel like we've asked that. We've asked
talked
that question
about that
1,000
at length,
times.
yeah.
I don't think this Ilhan Omar thing is gonna be the thing that triggers it. All right, we are going to get into the question portion of our show. Members and donators get in line in the queue for their questions to be sent to this guy, Alan J. Lichtman.
Yes. The membership costs barely more than my soda.
With inflation, man.
Yeah, and it's much better for you.
That's true. We have over 1,100 people watching, but only 500 likes. Make sure you like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. We're trying to hit 180,000 subscribers, and we're very close. So help us get to that goal. Share the episodes. Share our clips. It would mean a lot to us. Our first question is from one of our beautiful members. Oh, and a few people donated memberships tonight. I want to get to that.
Oh, that's nice.
John Thayer and Donald Bebel. Thank you both for donating memberships. All right. Our first question of the night comes from one of our beautiful members, Robs. They say, hello, Dr. L. Greetings from Minneapolis, a city under attack by ICE, but her people are stronger than them. I want to share my thought. First, it was Renee Good, then it was Alex Pretti. Who's next? How many more innocents' lives need to die at the hands of ICE?
I can only hope no more. But, I'm not confident that we have seen the end of ICE-initiated violence. And I am even less confident that those responsible are going to be brought to justice. You cannot have the DHS, which has already gone on record, right, Sam, lying about both of these instances long before an investigation. And when I say lying, what they said was utterly contradicted by what we can see and hear, even though they tell us, don't believe your own eyes and your own ears. How can you just trust such an organization that not only in these instances, but in every instance has come out with lies, blaming the victim and exonerating the agents? You cannot trust them to conduct an investigation. At a minimum, it's got to be an investigation in partnership with local and state authorities as a standard in these matters, as we had after the killing, for example, of George Floyd. But they've shut out the locals. They've shut down the crime scenes. They haven't shared the information. And why would they do this unless they have a lot to hide? Donald Trump says, I'm going to oversee this investigation. And he's invested more than anyone else in the phony stories, blaming the victim, blaming the Democrats, and exonerating the agents. I have no confidence whatsoever that there's going to be an investigation that holds anyone accountable. So far in all these other cases, remember, these are only the most recent. There have been 16 cases of shooting. No agent has ever been held accountable under the law, under the criminal law.
$10 donation from the Switchboard. They say, Professor, why would Gnome/Peddle and company say this guy shouldn't have had a gun? When at Trump protests and rallies, you see guys with assault weapons on their shoulder. I think we touched on that earlier.
Let me reiterate, because this could not be more important. This is how they understand rights. Rights only apply to those who support and agree with them. Perfectly okay for this kid, I think these guns are illegal because he was too young, to bring assault weapons into an incredibly tense, uncertain, swirling protest, kill 2 people, supposedly in self-defense. He was acquitted. Perfectly okay. We're pardoning them for perpetrators to bring guns to the violent Capitol insurrection, but not okay for this guy to have legal concealed weapons that he never brandished, contrary to what they have claimed, was never even close to being in his hand. This is the point. They do not believe in the American principle articulated first in the Declaration of Independence, right? That all men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights. No, not all men or women are endowed with rights. Only those that they decide should have rights are endowed with rights. Nothing could be more un-American than that.
Shout out to John Rogers for gifting 5 memberships.
Nice.
Our next question is from Alex Kawa. With all the tyranny and government overreach happening, some leftists/liberals have discussed arming themselves out of an abundance of caution for protection. You've been a vocal advocate for repealing the Second Amendment. Have recent events made you reconsider?
No, recent events have not made me reconsider. America would be much safer if, like other countries, we had comprehensive gun control programs. Look, there are some 15,000 gun homicides every year in this country. An American is 20 times more likely to be murdered by a gun than a resident per capita of our closest peer countries, those in the G7 group of nations plus Australia. Not 7%, not 20% more likely, 20 times more likely. And I don't believe that our future lies in an armed confrontation with government paramilitary or military forces. I think that's what they'd like you to try to do, and it's the wrong thing to do. We still need to rely, insofar as we can, on elections and democratic processes.
Professor, almost every day new parallels between the Trump administration, their policies, and those of Nazi Germany emerge. Very worrisome. But the Nazis face mass protests, marches / civil disobedience, like what Trumpsters are facing today. I know only of Rosenstrasse demonstration involving maybe 200 people in early 1943. Are today's marches an obstacle that Trump faces that the Nazis did not? Thank you for all you do. You're my hero.
Wow.
That's from Mick Looper.
Yeah, it was not possible to demonstrate against the Nazi government in Nazi Germany. It's dangerous now. I'm not comparing what's going on in America to Nazi Germany. We have a lot of safeguards that they did not have, and we have a much longer tradition of democracy, which they did not have. Although, obviously there are some chilling parallels I'm not equating to, but it is dangerous, as Good and Pretti learned, and others, 16 shootings, lots of people, having agents break into their homes, break their car windows. It's not just the shootings. There are all kinds of other violations of people's rights. So yes, it's becoming more and more dangerous to demonstrate against, to challenge this regime, but we're not there yet, and I hope we never get there for Nazi Germany.
$5 donation from the Mad Hatter Forever.
All right.
They say, should Congress form a select committee to investigate ICE? By the way, I think their acronym should stand for Intimidation, Corruption, Evasion.
I love it. I love it. I love that breakdown of the acronym. Absolutely, they should form a special select committee. We had a special select committee of the U.S. Senate that broke open the Watergate scandal. We had the January 6th committee recently, compiling all kinds of incredible information about the attempt by Donald Trump and his allies to impede the peaceful transfer of power. So yes, I don't think it's going to happen unless the Democrats retake the Congress, but absolutely that's a very sound idea with precedent.
This is a question from member Dirtier Dog. They say, Professor, given past tensions that have led Americans to both large and small prior instances of revolting against their government, like the Civil War and Whiskey Rebellion, how do current tensions compare?
Well, they don't quite compare to the Civil War, when really two fundamentally different ways of life were pitted against one another. As Lincoln so presciently said, the nation cannot long endure half slave and half free. The South believed that their safety, their livelihood, their very way of life dependent upon preserving the horrible institution of slavery. And whereas eventually in the North, sufficient momentum grew up to realize Lincoln was right. And we could not allow, the South to break away unconstitutionally, or to have a nation half slave, half free. We're not there yet, and I hope we never get there.
Good point, Dad. $5 donation from Bill Linton. They say, hello, Professor L. Tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of the Shuttle Challenge disaster. What are your memories from that day?
Oh.
Think about it for a second.
Yeah, my memory was first absolute horror. I was a big fan. I devoured science fiction as a kid. I was a big fan of the space program. Being a teacher, I was appalled as well by what happened. And I thought that was one of Ronald Reagan's final moments. A moment, supposedly the heir of his tradition, but he isn't. Donald Trump has never been able to achieve to bring us together in such a compassionate and eloquent way.
$10 donation from Free Throw Guy 22. They say, Professor Lichtman, how can we show other nations that are having far-right awakenings and mobilizations similar to MAGA that it's wrong and won't be tolerated?
Well, we got to continue to use the judicial system. If you're a lawyer, get involved. If you're not a lawyer, contribute to organizations that are fighting the tyranny. But ultimately, the most important weapon, and how many times have I said this, Sam, is the vote. Vote, organize, get others to vote, and do everything in our power. Volunteer to be a poll worker. Support the lawyers that are fighting for free and fair elections. If we lose our elections, then we are truly in the darkest place we've been since the Civil War.
Question from 2009 KY Gal. They say, how can we restore our relationship with our allies if we ever rid ourselves of the orange menace? They know we are always a swing state away from electing another freak. So do we need to just eliminate the Electoral College? Aside from that, how do we keep nut jobs from winning their party nominations? I think we need civic education back in schools to help with this.
I've written a whole book on this, of course.
Oh.
I think I've written a book on everything at my age by now.
Nice, dude.
Yes. It's called 13 Cracks, Repairing American Democracy After Trump, in which I do talk about how to replace the Electoral College, how to reform the United States Senate, and how to adopt other reforms to prevent any president of any party from assuming authoritarian type of power. But it's going to be, so far, of course, none of these reforms have come close to being adopted, but never give up.
Speaking of 13 Cracks, someone actually asked, have you considered updating 13 Cracks? I think it's a funny name. I don't know.
Yeah, I love it. I'm busy enough. I've got 3 new books.
What?
3 new books coming out. This September, my book on Great American Presidents, 10 Keys to Presidential Greatness, will be out on September 1st, 2026. Then next year, The Keys to the 10 Worst Presidents will be out. And then the following year, hopefully it's still under review, my book on American insurrections, how they've changed the country.
This is a question from John U6H4X. They say, the GOP dislike of Muslims, Syrian refugees, Somalians, Haitians have reached a 1932 German level. Very scary. How does this racism compare to segregationist those days in the 1950s?
Yeah. I've written a book about that, too.
No, you had. There's no way.
It's right behind us.
Oh, my gosh.
Called Conservative at the Core,
Wow.
A New History of American Conservatism, in which I argue that all of these things that Donald Trump perpetrates, racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, have a long history on the right. And Donald Trump is not the repudiation of American conservatism, but its realization in the 21st century. And I just saw an article, I forget where it was, it might have been the New York Times, talking about this long history, and in particular hearkening back to the most important grassroots conservative organization of the last 100 years, the Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s, which figures prominently in my book.
Why are billionaires like Larry Ellison and Tim Cook totally committed to Trump? Don't they have enough money to have a conscience? Or is the bottom line racism?
Do rich people ever have enough money?
No.
Never. There's always the quest for more. Gosh, there's always someone richer than me. I have to catch up to them. I don't know these people well enough to make a judgment about their racism or their misogyny or their xenophobia, but I do know Trump is the greatest thing that's ever happened for the billionaire class. Not only has he given them enormous tax breaks, but he's basically said, we're not going to impose any environmental regulations, any civil rights regulations. You can go any regulations on fraud. You know, this is the guy who, you know, is supposedly anti-fraud, dismantling our anti-fraud agencies, destroying them, basically saying you can do whatever you want.
I think Tim Cook is terrified of tariffs too. I think he's just terrified of Trump generally for the Apple business, and he's a little pussy. By
the way, a bunch of CEOs
yes, sir,
of some major corporations in Minnesota have called for de-escalation of ICE.
Good for them. Have you ever read The Banality of Evil, Hannah Arendt? If so,
yes.
Do you recommend it, and why?
Absolutely. Hannah Arendt is difficult. She's not an easy read. It's not like reading the comic book.
Oh, it's not like Calvin and
She
Hobbes.
is one of the greatest social philosophers of the last 100 years. And The Banality of Evil is a very important book. You know, by its very title, it indicates evil can come in a seemingly harmless face. And of course, the great example of that was Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. That is, the carrying out, not the idea of the Holocaust. An absolutely nameless, faceless, ordinary, totally banal individual.
Was Nicholas II unlucky, incompetent, or trapped by a system that no one could fix? Who's Nicholas II?
He was the last czar
of Russia,
who was assassinated during the Russian Revolution. A horrible, despotic ruler. I would say unlucky, incompetent, yes, trapped in a horrible system, and evil.
Do you think Trump actually has a deal with Greenland?
I don't, but I don't know.
Well,
doesn't appear that way.
It seemed like when he was in Davos, European leaders sat down and they all came out and they said they had a deal, but I haven't really heard anything since then.
I don't know. You know, you never know with Trump because you can't believe anything he says. He's still claiming that, you know, prices have plummeted under his watch, when in fact prices have risen at about the same rate as the last year of Joe Biden. He's still claiming, you know, that he actually won 2020 in a landslide, despite every single study, including by his own administration, contradicting that. I can go on and on. So you can't believe anything he says.
Professor Lichtman, this is from Brian Ducote. They say, Professor Lichtman, just read 2 of your books on Audible.
Wow.
Will any more of your books be put on Audible?
I sure hope so, but I don't control that. The publisher does.
Well, get on them.
I'll get on them. Not like I don't have other things to do.
You can make a lot, you can make a lot of headway on Audible.
Yeah, I like the Audible. And a lot of people have told me to move with the publisher to get on Audible, and I will.
Okay, Dad. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live this evening. I want to give some shout outs to Travis Riley, who said, everyone please call Congressman Emmer. Peaceful Resistor, who said, many thanks, Dr. Lichtman and Sam. Thank you, Robs, Philip H, for your donation. And I want to give a special shout out tonight to Joanne Roberts, who said, thank you for your wealth of knowledge and hard work, both of you. May I dedicate this donation, though not a lot this time, to my adult son who has brain cancer. Best wishes from Melbourne, Australia. We are thinking about your son, Joanne, and we hope that he recovers from his brain cancer.
Yes, and let me tell you, I'm a survivor myself, a 24-year cancer survivor. So you can do it, and our heart goes out to you.
Yes. All right. With that, yes, prayers for your son, Joanne. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. Dad, what are your final words to the people tonight?
You know, I've implied this before, and Sam has laughed at me.
Me?
Yes, but there are cracks Republicans, and not just those, who are traditional Trump critics, but even some Trump allies have begun to show some cracks and realize that what Trump is doing with ICE and with the violence and the justification of the violence cannot stand, at least can't stand politically. And maybe there will be some cracks in Trump's base. And by the way, immigration was his signature issue, right? He's down in the latest poll to 39% approval on his signature issue. That's incredible.
Sounds like my dog is getting into trouble. I don't know if people in the chat can hear that. Also, shout out to Anthony Armad for doing a lot of good work today. Again, thank you to Joanne. Prayers for her son. Thank you, and good night.
Good night.